Puss in Boots. Once upon a time, a poor miller died and left his 3 sons all his poor property: the mill, the donkey, and the cat. 3 brothers had soon made the division. Neither the lawyer nor the attorney was sent for. Those guys, if called, would soon have eaten up the poor heritage. So the eldest had the mill, the second had the donkey, and the youngest the cat. And that's it. The youngest son was not at all content at having so poor a share.
My brothers may get their living well enough by joining their shares together. But for my part, when I have eaten up my cat and made me a muffler of his skin, I must die of hunger.
The cat, who listened to all this without appearing to take any notice, suddenly spoke to the miller's son.
Don't be sad, my master. You have but to give me a bag and get me a pair of boots so I could walk through the brambles. And soon you shall see that you have gotten me not so poor a share as you think.
The youngest son did not think much of what the cat said, but he also remembered seeing him play quite a cunning trick to catch rats and mice. He often saw his cat hanging himself by the heels in a barn to make believe he was dead or hiding in the meal. So the cat's master decided not to despair of his pet's help in his misery. When the cat had what he asked for, he booted himself very resolutely, and putting a bag about his neck, he went into a wood where lived a great number of rabbits. On the meadow he put a bran and dandelions into his bag, and stretching out at length as if he were dead, he waited for some young rabbits, not yet acquainted with the deceits of the world, to come into his bag for a treat. He had scarcely shut his eyes as he had what he wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and Mr. Puss immediately got him, drawing close the strings.
Got you!
Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace and asked to speak with the king. He was shown upstairs into His Majesty's apartment. Making a low bow to the king, the cat said,
I have brought you, sire, a rabbit. My noble lord, Marquis of Carabas, has commanded me to present it to your majesty from him.
Tell your master that I thank him, and that I am pleased with his gift. Another time the cat went and hid among some standing corn, still holding his bag open. When 2 partridges flew into it, he drew the strings and so caught them both. He then went and presented his prey to the king, as he had done before of the rabbit which he took in the wood. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure and ordered his servants to reward the cat. The cat continued for 2 or 3 months to carry His Majesty some of his master's game. One day the cat heard that the king was to take a ride in a carriage along the riverside with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. So he said to his master,
If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. You have only but go and bathe in the river, just at the spot that I shall show you, and leave the rest to me.
The miller's son, now the Marquis of Carabas, did what his cat advised him, without knowing what could be the use of it. While he was bathing, the king passed by in a carriage, and suddenly the cat started shouting with all his might.
Help! Help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas is drowning!
At this shouting, the king put his head out of the carriage window and saw the cat who had so often brought him wildfowl. I know this cat! Guards, help his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas! While the guards were drawing poor Marquis out of the river, the cat came up to the carriage.
Oh, how awful! Your Majesty, while my master was bathing, some rogues came by and ran off with his clothes. I cried out, Thieves! Stop them! Get the thieves! but they just vanished, and now my master is all naked.
But actually, the cunning cat had hidden his master's clothes under a great stone. "Hey, officers of my wardrobe! Ride back this minute and fetch from the castle one of my best and prettiest suits for the Lord Marquis of Carabas." The king's order was immediately obeyed, and the miller's son was soon dressed as a true marquis and conversed with the king and his daughter. "Welcome, my dear Lord Marquis of Carabas. I'm glad to make your acquaintance."
He's so handsome. What a sweet face.
And when the Marquis of Carabas cast on her 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances, the princess immediately fell in love with him to distraction. "Come into the carriage, my dear Marquis. Be so kind as to take part in our airing."
Thank you, Your Majesty. I am so honored.
My plan worked.
The cat, overjoyed, ran on before the carriage. Soon he met with some countrymen who were mowing a meadow and said to them,
Good people, you who are mowing, if you do not tell the king that the meadow you mow belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as the meat for the pie.
The king did not fail to ask the mowers to whom the meadow they were mowing belonged.
To our Lord Marquis of Carabas!
"You have a good property there."
Yes, sire. Those meadows bring me a plentiful harvest every year.
In a while, our master cat, who went still on before the carriage, met with some reapers and said to them,
Good people, you who are reaping, if you do not say that all this wheat belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped as small as the meat for the pie.
The king, who passed the field a moment later, wished to know to whom belonged all the wheat.
To our Lord Marquis of Carabas!
The king was again very well pleased with the marquis. The master cat, who went always before, said the same thing to all the countrymen he met, and the king, who was passing by after him, was left only to be astonished at the vast estates of the Marquis of Carabas. At last, Mr. Puss came to a stately castle, the master of which was an ogre, the richest ever known. All the lands which the king had then passed through belonged to the ogre's castle. The cat decided to take care and ask the servants about their master.
Good servants, your master is very rich, to be sure. Maybe he is also a kind man who treats you well.
You'd better leave at once, Mr. Puss. Our master is a cruel ogre and a sorcerer. He can transform himself into any animal, great or small. You'd better leave.
Bah! Take me to him!
Making a low bow to an ogre, the cat said,
I'm sorry to disturb you, but I am just a poor pilgrim who could not pass so near your beautiful castle without having the honor of paying my respects to its master.
The ogre received his guest as civilly as an ogre could do. "Sit down and have a rest." Cunning Master Puss immediately started the conversation.
I was told that you have the gift of being able to change yourself into all sorts of creatures. But are you able to transform yourself? For example, into a lion or elephant and the like?
"That is true. And to convince you, you shall see me now become a lion." The cat was so terrified at the sight of a lion so near him that he immediately climbed onto the roof by the gutter, not without much trouble and danger, for his boots were of no use to him for holding on to the tiles with his claws. A little while after, when the puss saw that the ogre had resumed his natural form, he came down.
Oof! You gave me quite a fright. I must owe you. It was a true lion. Amazing! But I was told you also have the power to take on the shape of the smallest animals. For example, of a rat or a mouse. But frankly speaking, I take this to be impossible.
"Impossible! You shall now see!" And he immediately changed himself into a mouse and began to run about the floor. As soon as the cat saw the mouse, he fell upon it and ate it up. Meanwhile, the king, seeing the fine castle, had a mind to go into it. Puss, who heard the noise of His Majesty's carriage coming over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king,
Your Majesty is welcome to the castle of my Lord Marquis of Carabas.
What? My Lord Marquis, does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing finer than this courtyard and all the stately buildings which surround it. Let us see the interior, if you please. The Marquis gave his hand to the young princess and followed the king, who went first. They passed into the great hall, where they found a rich supper which the ogre had prepared for his friends, who were that very day to visit him. Besides, they have come but dared not to enter, knowing the king was in the castle. His Majesty was as charmed with the good manners of Marquis of Carabas as his daughter, who had fallen violently in love with the young man. So, seeing the vast estate the young Marquis possessed, the king said to him, It will be owing to yourself only, my Lord Marquis, if you are not my son-in-law. So the youngest miller's son, with low bows, accepted the great honor which His Majesty conferred upon him, and that very day married the princess. The cat became a great lord at his master's side and never ran after mice anymore. Well, maybe sometimes, just for fun. And here's all the tale of Puss in Boots.